suggest that we now proceed to the next lecture, and it is a lecture by two young women from the girlscanscan collective. I love that name, and today with us it is a bigger collective. Today with us are Lilla Kammermann and Lilla Varga. The collective was founded in 2020 within Budapest University of Technology. It looks for invisible layers and connections of the built environment. They've organized several public events, also participated in many of them, accompanied excursions of field trips of students and researchers from many universities, European universities in Budapest. So their activities include many interesting projects. I like the name of their latest exhibition, Ron Tom Tom Tom, which in Hungarian means I demolish, I destroy. So welcome Lilla and Lilla. I'm very curious about your lecture on tripping on modernist monuments. Welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to present and Lilla will join the discussion.
Okay.
Hello everyone. We're going to tell you about a bit about our trips and how we're tripping on modernist monuments in these countries already systematically, but other Eastern Bloc countries already. And let's start with what's actually scanning. So this is a picture we took in 2021 in Kiev, and you can see in the background, or in the foreground, that starts with the Orthodox Church, the history of the Ukrainian society. In the back to the left you see the prefabricated housing from the socialist times. On the right, you see the neoliberal development happening, but in the foreground, we see something you might not recognize on the first sight, and you have to get a little bit closer, and you have to see the invisible layers hidden behind. In this very specific case, it happened, the seeing behind, looking behind, happened through excavation by hand. Very subtle and very gentle thing to find the layer of the history which has been hidden. And that's one of our case studies. Bear with me, it's just one single big trivia. So we visited many others just like that, and we collected stories from these three countries on our first trip. To explain to you why we traveled to the east instead of the west. The only example we are taught, I personally studied in Germany, but in Eastern Germany. And just to specify that it's within the Eastern Bloc, yet the only example Eastern to us, and even from Eastern to Hungary, or generally from the region, was the Lilla student hut. And it was finished at that point. Never again anything mentioned. And we're going to show it to you later. We've been dealing with this history, with this past, just like any neighboring country in the region. And we didn't have the examples which we could relate to, especially not in the West. So we were thinking, instead of looking to the West, we just look to the East. And we just look to the immediate neighborhood. And that's how we ended up in Kiev, Kharkiv, then Chisinau and Bucharest. And we were looking at this building and at this heritage, but the way we organized our trip beforehand, our study trip, was that we were especially looking for people. So the people were the connecting point to the building and not the other way around. So we contacted local small initiatives who were engaging in any kind of way in saving that heritage. Because our question is, why are we demolishing, systematically erasing that era in these countries? But a person who is erasing and demolishing never gonna answer you the question truthfully. So we were asking the people who are actively working against that. So that's, I'm telling you now what you were seeing on the excavation picture. That was the wall of remembrance next to this hall of remembrance. And it was socialist artwork, which was completely covered by concrete by the Soviet people. And now the RVM Association is slowly by hand revealing this enormous amount of work. Behind that concrete layer, you have the whole history of mankind depicted. And that's a very good example to start this thing with. The demolition was not only happening, or the coverage of this heritage. In that case, we could visit many other cases. That was in 21. This we arrived in September. This has been done in July or August, so quite just a little bit time before we arrived there. And on the right, you see our interview partners who saved the building from complete demolition by climbing in and revitalizing the place after. So they started with this act of Lilla. We also see this kind of engagement, just like a big architectural renovation, equally important, done by the community. So they not just stopped the demolition, but they also created a community space around. But winter was coming at that time, so we were there in the autumn. And that's Lilla's diploma project, in which she just covered the roof for the winter. So very subtle act. It was outrageous at the Technical University in Budapest at the time, because she didn't design a new building. But you can all think what you think, but you can think what you want to think. But in this comparison, a new building and taking the act to cover up something which is already there, which has been actually the building of the year of 1983 in the Soviet Union. So after we got back to Hungary, we started our translation work. So we collected all these examples, but it was really important for us to translate everything into Hungarian and showcase it to the wider public. Because it was only 4 of us who traveled to the east and could meet these amazing people, but it was really important for us to bring it back in our mother tongue. And that was the first time we encountered the very big challenge of not having many words in Hungarian when it comes to these phenomena. So we could describe it in German or English, but not in Hungarian. So that was our first translatory work. We were showing this example to you before, from this Chisinau example of the National Stadium being cleaned by volunteers and cleaning caretaking. And we were watching this movie about Kolhász house life, and that's exactly the 2 occupations which are depicted in this movie. The cleaning lady and the caretaker telling you about the place. And reflecting to your presentation, we saw that the master maybe has some invisible workers behind to do much more at the end when it comes to the site, rather than just the act of being the planner and the architect. So the I Demolish, I Destroy was a later exhibition, but it's a very cute saying in Hungarian, because Rontom Bontom literally means I demolish, I destroy, but we use it for small children who act out and don't behave, destroy everything around themselves, like a kindergarten type of setting. And that's something which very much describes the way Hungarian society and government deals with our heritage for the past years. So a very Kafka situation. We were talking about lifting the monument preservation. For many years, you cannot We don't have in Hungary, we don't have a monument list. If you want to look it up, it doesn't exist. It's not because it's temporarily not online or there is a problem with the website. It's just not there because our government, more than 10 years ago, just systematically destroyed the monument preservation system. There is no authority to assign a monument. There is another government agency which has a website where you have two PDFs to download. One is to suggest a building on the list, and one is other for the developers to uplift this monument preservation. So long story short, that was our beginning of the journey that in 2020 there were unbelievably many demolitions happening, especially in Budapest. And the student studio which brought us together, that was the first open competition which we got aware of to save this building, but not specifically save, but to suggest an alternative future. So around 50 entries came, and I think probably we're not going to be able to show you, it's a gift. But there were 50 entries to this competition. What could be the alternative futures of this place instead of the demolition? Later it got demolished. That's the same site, but we still organized the studio at the exhibition, showcasing each of the alternative future on this very specific place. And what's very sad, that many of the sites, there were these demolitions happening in 1920, they are still empty plots. So these buildings could have had 5 more years, just if you count up until today, to be used and utilized. But they even decided to be demolished in the very second, without discussion. So we were talking, the title was a panorama, and we also listed Germany, because we have many connections to Germany through studying. And we are also learning a lot from Germany. We also did a study trip there. And we concluded that the former Eastern German part is not completely, but a much more developed discussion because it happened much earlier through the reunification. And the canonization of this time is more or less closed up. So it's not many discussions regarding buildings anymore in comparison to other countries which we're visiting. And one very important thing that we learned from the German discourse, I'm going to read it to you, that monuments can be valuable, not in spite of, but precisely because they are disputed, because they make social conflicts vividly and negotiably, is the reason for the invention of the concept of the controversial value of monuments. And that's very interesting, and it explains a lot of things for us, and hopefully it does also for you, that something what is controversial in itself can be valuable to depict, in the case of the former Eastern Bloc, many societal questions. Another theory we got introduced to through our Hungarian research was the floating gap theory, that if you look at the state of architecture at the moment, when it comes to the late modern heritage, the people behind, the people who were back then at the moment there and planning these buildings and executing, they are deceasing now. So it's very sparse when it comes to, you want to do interviews in the field, but you just don't find the interview partners anymore. And you maybe at the moment want to start to research a specific building, and it turns out the family of this deceased architect already threw out all the drawings which have been done. So also the museum system is quite behind. And of course, on one hand, there are many urban protests to save specific late modern buildings. But we really used the possibility to tell you about the removal. So the student studio is also the ASA Hungary representative. ASA is the European Association Student of Architects. Yeah. And in 2020, because of COVID, the international gathering was cancelled. So each nation was called upon to host a local ASA in their country. And that's where we ended up, and how we ended up in Krvavica, the landing event. That's me, that's Lilla. And in Hungary we don't have a sea like you do, but we have this big lake called Hungarian Sea. It's the Lake Balaton. And Krvavica was a really important place during socialism, because it was the high officials' summer resort. So every party official was spending their times here. I will show you later, but our president, Kádár, that was his private island, because he really liked to do fishing. So what about the rural cases? Since there is not a big dispute over the land, just like in the urban discourse, it's more likely to be left to decay. That's the case in Hungary. Sorry. Yeah, so that's János Kádár, and we were mentioning today, some of you who have been to the workshop, we were mentioning that next to your side there was this Hungarian refugee children camp. He was the prime minister right after the Hungarian Revolution, up until the system changed. So this side was his side, and if you look at the heritage buildings around, which are not under heritage protection, but heritage themselves, that's his villa. It's not demolished yet, but it's in very bad condition. That villa was the villa of the cultural minister. It got demolished, and that's the Fidel Castro villa, because he was a good friend and came often. So we were having workshops also in these buildings and trying to commemorate that time. And we were seeing in the beginning, and I will show you also other pictures, what's the state of the architecture now. It's decaying. But it was not the case up until the middle of the 2000s. So once again, a similarity to your side, it was not a system change which carried away these buildings, but it was rather this transition from socialism to post-socialism and capitalism. This is a movie which was there, same location, 15 years of difference. That's the outside cinema. We utilized every space for specific workshops. And the decay is not rural specific. This is in the center of the Budapest, the former party house from the communist regime. This is me and Kata, another girlscanscan member, giving a guided tour there this spring. Back to the side from the Balaton Lake, that's the swimming pool after the decay. And that's why it's very important to look to the east and look to the other examples, because that's the pool of Ceausescu. That's me taking a picture of it and me having the possibility to see this value of this past and letting me engage with it, which when it comes to the Hungarian heritage, it's not the case anymore since it got demolished. We really needed to show you this one because we were allowed by the mayor for free at the Balaton site for cleaning the beach from stones, because during the socialism someone thought it's a good idea to throw the stones in the beach part where children are swimming. So we literally spent the day carrying stones out of the water, which is a much heavier task than just carrying trash not in the water. But for that we were allowed, and we were published in a new local newspaper even for that act. So for us it was not a landing, but rather an embarking on this journey. And we are still continuing, and that's why we're very happy that even though on an academic level we see much of the progress that's another LINA member, Kate, they co-published a publication about this late modern heritage this year. It's getting more and more, not just an academic, but also a whole societal issue, because when it comes to urban housing, I have the number here, every fifth unit in Hungary is prefabricated, which makes it more than 700,000 units. But when it comes to rural housing, the number is even more. This is a cūrā cube. It has nothing to do with cūrā, it's just from the era. But there are almost 1 million units of that all over the country. And you see how people are making it their own from very different examples. So this societal issue, is rising, and more people are dealing with it, not just the academia. And we promised to Anna that we bring a good example when happy ending, the Hungarian managed to save a building. And it also leads back to the discussion yesterday that this building got under heritage protection, but it didn't stop the developer of thinking beyond, because you can see this green stripe, which perfectly fitted, I don't even show you the rendering, a completely coverage of a neoliberal development to fully use up the space. And it was the locals who looked it up and realized that green stripe is actually public space. And the local municipality was having an open call that people from the district are allowed to adopt spaces in the city which don't have a name yet, which don't belong to anyone yet, but they're still public space. So people living in the neighborhood made a group and created a new public garden, which is an official place now. So the developer has no chance of developing on that plot. So it's not just taking care, but also planting seeds. And I guess that's what we are all doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, are there immediate questions?
Always immediate. So, just kind of your quick answer or assessment, I think, because I think it's a very complex question if you would go fully into it. But I'm just thinking that since somehow, like many of these modernist buildings, they obviously sort of originate from this socialism worldview and the era, and kind of like how things are now going with more the world sort of like just globally being under this neoliberal real estate development. I'm just thinking that how much of it is sort of like disregard for the let's say like the architecture, the modernist heritage is somehow tied to this sort of disregard of anything that kind of originates from that other era in a way, because I think in some portions, at least in the Western view of things, it's sort of like an interest point, like that exhibition in MoMA or something like this about the Yugoslavian conflict. But then within the regions themselves, like the viewpoint somehow seems to vary.
It does vary. I can take the example of Hungary, that it sort of confused us. That of course you have the ones which are neoliberal, and it could be any building, it could be a classicistic building and to be demolished and redeveloped. But when it comes to Hungary, it's in many cases a national program. And it's the government having this political agenda when it comes to the UNESCO World Heritage Area of the main square where the parliament is, and another, which we were showing you, the idea competition, is the castle district. So this sort of dissonance of how each nation or government or society faces this era is in many cases in the hands of the politicians, and not really in the case, like in the hands of the professionals or citizens. So it's a very like Hungarian, what we ended up finding out, but when we were looking at Ukraine, we have to conclude that the time which started for us Hungarians after the Second World War, the Russian occupation, it started for them after the First World War. So for them it's much more of a wider range than when you go to the other countries from Czech Republic, for example, or Slovakia. The early modernist heritage for them is the oppression of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. So it mostly has nothing to do with the architecture itself, but these connotations. And it can be a mixture of neoliberal development and a political cocktail. And at the end of the day, it's people who want to live in their cities. So it's a stir of things, and you have to like depict them to these little mosaics, see them as not just single pieces. And it took a lot of time for us to, we have I think, how many did have 40 case studies at the moment, more or less. So each of them are unique, but we believe that they can learn from each other.
Thank you, Lilla. I love that you brought us with, I mean, you finished with planting the seed this lecture, because it was terrifying to hear, you know, there is no cultural heritage list in Hungary, but there is like a list that you immediately send an email, I'm going to demolish this. Of course there are lists happening like that in every country, but we just don't know like the email trajectories. But seeing this planting seeds and this little civic uprising comes to my mind the idea of victory gardens. I don't know if you know. Well, if I'm not mistaken, the practice started, or actually it was named like that, after and during the First World War. Victory gardens were gardens producing food in the cities, you know, in every plot that was available. So I even remember seeing some images in Zagreb locally, you know, around this representative national theaters that were actually covered in cornfields, you know, but this is the victory garden. So I see this as a little victory garden as well, especially now when we think, you know, that everything is commodified, you know, let's say, we are counting, especially in this tourism-infected cities such as Pula, you know, every bed counts, you know, every parking lot counts, and actually that is made it the most profitable entrepreneurship around here, but now actually the most curing entrepreneurship should be having a piece of a green lot.
And additional information, I might even say that it was like a double resistance, in a sense that the local municipality writing out these programs and doing adding the local protection, is this municipality is an oppositional municipality to the government. So them at least having this chance, and they were not specifically pointing out this plot, it was really the locals who went to the urban planning department and looked at the plans. So, and the two together succeeded. Like, and that's, I think that's very valuable in this story.
Thank you. Shall we continue? Yeah.